1600 hours, time for the news on freedom. My name is Mikhail Baranov, and I'll tell you about the main events of this hour. The Russian army launched 141 attack drones at Ukraine on Monday night. Ukrainian air defense neutralized 114 drones. And, as reported by the Air Force of the Armed Forces of Ukraine, the Russians attacked regions in the north, south, and east of the country. Hits were recorded at 17 locations, and debris fell at another 13. The residential sector of Kherson was under fire from the Russian army. In the Korabelny district, a woman was killed in the courtyard of a high-rise building as a result of the attack. 4 more people were injured. They've been hospitalized. This is reported by the city authorities.
I had just reached the 6th entrance of this building, and then the dust started rising over there. And I came here. They told me that a man was killed and a woman was wounded. I quickly went up to my place. I started calling him. I thought, it's right nearby. She lives in this building on the 1st floor. So I started calling. It was like busy there. Then it connected, and a man says, "Who are you? Who are you calling?" I say, "I'm calling Nadia." And he says, "She was killed."
Today at noon, Russian troops also attacked the central part of Kramatorsk. The strike hit near an apartment building. As a result of the shelling, 1 woman was injured. Utility services are working at the site of the strike.
At the moment, when it happened, I was sitting on the couch. When it started whistling, I didn't realize what it was. And when it finally went boom, then, the cat started hiding. There. They were the first to hear something was wrong. They started hiding. Well, and then right away, the explosion.
I was lying on the bed with my head right by the window. First, flower pots flew at my head, and then these big pieces of glass. My head is cut open. They took me to the emergency room right away. They gave me 2 stitches. I didn't have time to get theored. My husband there has a heart condition, strokes, pre-infarction, so I was more afraid for him. But he was in the kitchen, and the kitchen was actually damaged the least. But my 3 windows,
In the Chernihiv region, the Russian army deliberately continues to strike civilian targets. Occupying forces attacked the border town of Semenivka with FPV drones. A school building was damaged. In the Kolmenska community, a food industry enterprise was hit, local authorities report. In the Nizhyn district, the residential sector was damaged as a result of the Russian attack. 2 people were injured. Russia once again struck Ukraine's energy infrastructure. As a result of the shelling, some residents in the Odesa, Sumy, Kharkiv, Kherson, and Chernihiv regions were left without power. This was reported by the Ministry of Energy. The situation remains most difficult in the Chernihiv region. Over 300,000 customers there were left without power. Energy workers are working around the clock to restore the power supply as soon as possible. Repair efforts are being hampered. There are constant threats of repeated shelling. Russian occupiers shelled Kharkiv several times today, attacking with Shahhed drones. One of them struck a multi-story residential building. The roof, windows in apartments, cars, and the surrounding area were all damaged. Additionally, preliminary reports say one of the latest strikes hit a school. A 15-year-old child is suffering from acute stress. A city bus driver and at least 3 others were also reported injured. In Odesa, emergency rescue operations have concluded at the building where 3 people died. Meanwhile, the clearing of debris and structures continues. As a reminder, during the attack on the city, the Russian army targeted civilian infrastructure with UAVs. 16 people sustained injuries. They are currently in medical facilities. As a result, Odesa has seen widespread destruction and damage to homes in the private sector. Energy facilities were also hit in the strike. A day of mourning has been declared in the city. More details on this attack in the following report.
This is what the house hit by the Russian army looks like. There is a massive hole in its facade. This is exactly where the Russian drone struck. The bodies of 2 women and a 2-year-old child were found under the rubble. Daniel is their neighbor. His apartment is further from the epicenter of the blast. He was at home at the time of the attack.
When we heard the second Shahed approaching, it cut its engine. We quickly jumped up and moved to the load-bearing walls. And at that moment, literally 5 seconds later, it just exploded. Windows blew out. There was dust. You couldn't see anything.
After the attack, Daniil immediately rushed to help his neighbors.
For example, I carried out a young woman with a broken leg that had turned completely blue. She stayed below until it was quiet. There's chance. Ambulance arrived, we got her out fast, they did their job.
The Russian attack began around 2:30 in the morning. Russian Shahed-type attack drones entered the city en masse and in several waves. First, there were 20 of them, then another 10 were added. The drone's flight path was chaotic, so there is a lot of damage in the city. About 20 private homes were damaged in 2 districts of the city at once.
Numerous fires broke out in the residential sector. Private homes, dormitories, a private kindergarten, and administrative buildings were damaged. Despite the constant air raid sirens, all fires were extinguished.
Energy facilities were also hit, causing partial power outages in 3 city districts. The Russian army has unleashed a real terror on the residents of Odesa and the region. Attacks have become daily and around the clock. During the day, air raid sirens shut down government offices, banks, schools, daycares, and medical facilities. And at night, Russian attacks destroy civilian infrastructure. Ksenia Sitinskaya, Zarab Tedaliri from Odessa for the Freedom TV channel.
We need to further strengthen our air defense system. That's how Ukraine's president reacted to the Russian army's night attack on Odessa and strikes on the energy grid. The president emphasized that Russia has no intention of stopping the shelling.
Now, all partners must work together to strengthen airspace protection so that the percentage of downed drones and missiles keeps rising every time. This is a daily task for everyone, not just for Ukraine. After all, by supplying us with equipment and providing support, partners are helping themselves through this joint effort. Russia is not going to stop. Volodymyr Zelensky, president of Ukraine, on Telegram.
120 times the Russian army tried to break through Ukrainian defenses over the past 24 hours. According to the General Staff of the Armed Forces, the Russians were most active in the Pokrovsk direction. There, defense forces repelled 25 assaults. Another 19 attacks were stopped on the Kostyantynivka front and 12 on the Hulayapol section. Also, the enemy tried to advance on the Oleksandrivka bridgehead 8 times.
If we're talking about the Zaporizhzhia direction, of course, both the defense forces and the enemy are seeing some success. They're using a massive amount of forces and resources to carry out one of their key objectives. That is to get within range of the city of Zaporizhzhia, which would allow them to use tube artillery to shell residential areas. That's what the enemy's trying to achieve. But as we look forward to the spring and summer, I can give you my personal guarantee that the defense forces will absolutely not allow the enemy to do that.
Russia's total combat losses since the start of the full-scale invasion have already exceeded 1,304,000 people. Of those, 940 occupiers were eliminated over the past day, according to the General Staff. In addition, over the past 24 hours, Ukraine's defense forces destroyed 2 tanks, a dozen armored combat vehicles, and 58 Russian artillery systems. The Russian army will also be missing nearly 2,000 drones and 259 vehicles. On the night of April 6th, armed forces drones struck the frigate Admiral Makarov in the port of Novorossiysk. They also hit the floating drilling rig Savash. According to the commander of the Unmanned Systems Forces, Robert Madyar Bravdi, the frigate Admiral Makarov carries Kaliber cruise missiles. During the attack, the Russian military launched air defense missiles directly from the ship. However, that didn't stop the Ukrainian drones from reaching their target. Intelligence is currently assessing the extent of the damage to the facilities. Estonia will not be a passive victim of aggression if Russia decides to test NATO's strength in the Baltic region, the country's foreign ministry stated. Tallinn has its own armed forces, and they will act within the first hours of a potential conflict, stated the Secretary General of the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs. The response to threats from the Russian Federation has been the modernization of the army and the defense industrial complex of European states. More details in our report.
EU countries are accelerating the implementation of military programs due to the increased threat of possible Russian aggression. Estonia has invested 7 million euros in a defense startup, technology development, and the launch of production for cheaper and more mass-produced air defense systems compared to existing models. Estonian Prime Minister Kristen Michal announced that in the coming years, the country intends to create a layered air defense system, including short, medium, and long-range capabilities. Estonia is already prepared to withstand possible aggression from Russia, the Ministry of Foreign Affairs stated.
Estonia and the Baltic states are sometimes viewed as just territory vulnerable to attack. That is not the case. We have armed forces, and the largest ones in the relevant territory. We are a small country, but we are preparing. We spend 5% of GDP on defense. We are creating a division. If little green men cross our border, we will shoot them. Jonathan Vaseviov, Secretary General of the Estonian Ministry of Foreign Affairs, in an interview with Veltum Santak.
Lithuania has announced major changes to its defense system. The country is launching an annual draft, which will be a key element in building up the reserve and strengthening the army's combat readiness. As part of mandatory military service, Lithuania plans to draft about 5,000 young people between the ages of 18 and 22 in 2026. Authorities emphasize that this model is designed to strengthen the state's defense capabilities amid an unstable regional security situation.
We understand the geopolitical reality that the enemy is at the gates, and it is a constitutional duty and the necessity to serve one's country. Of course, our goal, first and foremost, is to build as large a reserve for our armed forces as possible. Because we understand and see from the combat experience in Ukraine's resistance to Russian aggression that having standing armed forces is very important.
The Polish Ministry of the Interior reported a nearly 96% decrease in the number of illegal border crossing attempts from the territory of Belarus. According to the country's Ministry of the Interior, this is the result of government policy, investments in security, and the temporary suspension of the right to asylum. France also plans to significantly strengthen national defense, increasing stockpiles of drones and ammunition, create new weapon systems, and increase the military budget. In July 2025, France published a new national strategic review, which emphasizes increased tensions and the need to prepare for them. 10 months have passed since then, and the situation's become even more serious. After Donald Trump's remarks on a possible U.S. exit from NATO, the European Union started developing backup defense plans in case the alliance breaks up. Ukraine is seen as a key element of the new European security architecture. Kyiv is actively joining all available formats of cooperation with partners to strengthen security and is preparing to expand its presence on new international platforms, President Volodymyr Zelensky stated.
There are new agreements. Ukraine will be even more represented in new security formats. This will definitely strengthen our export capabilities and Ukrainian defense potential.
Ukraine's permanent representative to NATO, Alyona Getmanchuk, believes the current turbulence from the U.S. president's remarks could lead to a rethink of the alliance. She stated that Ukraine is a key NATO partner in confronting its most direct and significant threat, Russia. And President Volodymyr Zelensky noted that if partners are ready for decisive action, Ukraine is ready to provide them with the necessary support by bringing in its own expertise, experience, and technological developments. The head of state emphasized that in today's geopolitical climate, it's impossible to imagine real security without Ukraine. Natalia Gusak for Freedom TV Channel.